for joining us for this Convo Fango Directors Panel. Super awesome to have you all here. I'm super excited to talk with all of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, I'm Angel, by the way. I did not introduce myself to all of you as you're trickling in. Nice to meet you all.
Hi.
Hi. Chris promised to deliver the awkward, uncomfortable energy that every panel needs. That's why I thought I was here, so
Don't
it's fine. We'll
worry.
figure it out.
Holding myself nervously.
It's endearing. We love it.
Okay, yay. Right.
So there's an eclectic background of talent that we have here. You're all writers and directors, but also we have acting and makeup and other disciplines represented among here. Can you guys kind of just like talk about your path to directing, like how you started out in film in general, and then the path you took to the director's chair?
Simultaneously?
Yeah, if you could all, I'm gonna count to three.
1, 2, 3, go!
Go for it. Yes. This is an experimental kind of thing that we're working on, and we're just gonna have the audio going. Zoe, do you want to start?
I'll first.
Okay. Shawn,
Oh.
is that you?
No, I'm probably not the tallest.
Okay. All right, go for it.
I got into it through, I was originally, I took philosophy for the writing part of it, and to learn how to make movies, I got in my very early 20s as in the art department for the local industry and became a set decorator for a few years while I tried to get my writing legs, and generally gradually the writing and directing took over for the props mastering and set decorating.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. Steven, how about you?
I mean, I started making movies when I was 12. I borrowed my dad's Super 8 camera and was doing stop motion animations in the basement. And that kind of segued into me doing makeup because I started doing videos, like shooting little videos with my friends in high school, and combining that with the stop motion stuff I had learned. And I don't know, it all just kind of kept expanding upon itself and getting bigger and bigger, and going from, you know, making movies in my parents' garage to also doing makeup on set. And then kind of in between that, still making my own films and kind of going back and forth between learning prosthetics and getting into the prosthetic side of the film industry, but also making my own little indie movies at the same time. And they both just kind of, like, both streams kind of just went at the same time. And now I just jump back and forth between the two. And yeah, so it's like the indie movie side of thing helped inform my prosthetics career because I was able to kind of like visualize stuff more so than other people that just went to makeup school. And then the prosthetics informed my indie movies that I made, like with my Astron 6 friends and things. So yeah, I've really just been jumping back and forth between the prosthetics and the directing since I was a kid.
Nice. Do you do effects on your own movies? Like when you're directing, do you do effects at all? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I just got back from doing a few episodes of this Day of the Dead series, shooting on BC, and I was, on weekends, I was helping Todd Masters at his shop, like sculpting and making prosthetic stuff for that show. So I just like doing everything. I mean, when you're used to doing everything yourself, you can't help but keep doing it no matter what you're doing. So yeah, I'm always doing my own prosthetics and creatures and things for my own movies because I know exactly what I want and how to make it the way I want to make it. So why stop doing that?
Fun. All right. All right. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, Stephen, I have to say our movies played together at Beyond Fest two weeks ago. And so Psycho Gourmand just looked totally insane, like such a like vision.
Oh,
like,
thank you.
Really fucking like all of the creatures. I was like, how is this like a low budget movie? These are like insane. Like everything was just so bananas. So congratulations on that.
Actually, did you go to Beyond Fest?
Yeah, it was really fun. It was a drive-in all week long. I saw Chris's movie there also. Actually, it was the next day. I was dedicated to the drive-in thing. I rented a muscle car. Like I was really like embracing, and because we couldn't do a Q&A, I put my phone number on the screen. So I let everybody who was watching the movie call and text me throughout it, which I totally recommend. Like, in this new drive-in world that we're in, if you're missing that like interaction with people that you get from festivals, it was like lovely. Like it was, and then nobody hit me up the next day. It was just,
That's awesome.
but to Tarantino it back to where I started, which is, like Steven, actually, when I was doing the thing of being a kid and making like Super 8s, and I was also, when I was really young was when I was most into horror movies, and my friends would come over and I would do like zombie makeup on us, and we'd go and run around in the streets of my neighborhood and like stop cop cars dressed like zombies, and I was casting faces. But then later in life, I wasn't a filmmaker for a while. I was focused on being a musician. And I was like very like far out, like experimental, like I was playing like the electric sitar but I was filming my friends in bands, and I felt, I guess there was a certain point where I felt like I had taken that part of myself as far as it could go. And I remember I was in a van touring, reading the book, Raging Bulls and Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. And I was like, I feel like that's what I want my life to be like. And I literally, like, I gave away my musical instruments and moved to LA to become a filmmaker. And then it was this weird, like, it hadn't always been horror movies for me. And then at a certain point I was like, I don't know how to make, like, I love Ingmar Bergman and I love, like, there's no way I could make a movie like that. So, but if I can externalize the metaphor into a demon, then I can do it. So then I became a filmmaker. That story, it was like 20 years long. That was, I really compressed that.
I mean, I imagine it's a similar journey for a lot of you guys, where it's like, I'm telling you this story that spans like decades or however you came to be about it. But
and that's a really important thing, that whenever I talk to people who are just starting their careers or just trying to get it, it's like, it's going to take forever. Don't freak out. Don't let that like drive you insane. That's like my number one regret is the anxiety I felt because I didn't think it was happening fast enough.
Right.
And then once you're making movies, it doesn't fucking matter how long it took you. I don't know if everybody else agrees. Steven, you're like 12 years old. You might.
You're 100% right. It's going to take whatever it takes. And like, no matter where you are in life, like, you really can become a filmmaker at any point. If anything, I feel jealous of older filmmakers having more life experience than me, because I do think that informs a lot of creativity. And so, yeah, you're totally right. You can really start out at any time in your life.
Nice. Alastair, I know your internet is being a little glitchy. Can you hear us right now, though?
Yes, sorry guys, I'm in South Africa. It's 2:00 in the morning. Normally I've got a little bit more,
Oh no.
a little bit more personality than this, and now the internet is really, acting like a third world piece of crap here. So I kind of missed everything. What was the question?
We're just talking about how you guys are kind of representative of a very eclectic background. You're all writers and directors, but a lot of you started out doing other things as well. So I'm just curious about your path to the director's chair, like how you got started in film and how you ended up as a director. Oh no. I thought he was
that question paralyzed him.
Oh, great. I got fired off of that question. All right. All right, let's jump over to Chris.
I think similar, I too was making short films in high school with my friends. I remember one of the first films we made was the unofficial sequel to Xanadu.
Wow.
But I made it a zombie movie.
Holy shit.
So mashing up things has been my jam for a long time. But I think the shortest version is I think writing. I wrote my way to the director's chair. I was writing a lot in college. Actually, wrote the first movie I ever made. Got made when I was in college, and it was a adaptation of a book that I did for Larry Clark. And I was very young and very confused and didn't really know what I was doing, but pretended like I did. And I've been doing that ever since. And yeah, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then finally convinced somebody in Louisiana with like oil money to let me make my first film, and they were crazy. And then the rest was history.
Love that. That's amazing. All right, Zoe, I know you have a background in acting as well, so.
Yeah, I went to drama school at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and but I always loved writing, and I wrote a one-woman show for myself to star in, which is like sort of a cliche. But it did get me my first agent and manager out of acting school, and then I continued writing, and my now husband and I wrote a film together called Breaking Upwards that we made on a micro budget. And we made it for $15,000 and just like got our friends to be in it, and we both acted in it, and that just opened the door for us as filmmakers. And then we continued to write and produce films together that he was directing that I would act in. And that sort of served as boot camp for me, especially in the micro budget world. I mean, we also made a film with a studio. So I really like cut my teeth that way. Behind, like learning to wear multiple hats. And then my first feature as a director, as well as a writer and actor, was called Band-Aid, and was a couple years ago. And it was also a musical in which we played the music live. So I added another hat. But this is the Craft Legacy is my first foray into genre filmmaking. So it was an exciting turn for me as a filmmaker, and yeah, just an amazing learning experience.
Amazing. All right. I have to ask, were you a fan of The Craft, like when you were younger, when it came out?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that movie was everything to me. Yeah, no, when the opportunity came to me, like Blumhouse asked me to pitch a take on it, on a reimagining of the original, and I was like tweaking because it was so seminal for me as a young riot girl myself, and so yeah, this is a total dream.
Awesome. That's the answer I love to hear. That's cool. So I'm curious, obviously you all have a love for the genre. A lot of you guys were making movies as kids, incorporating zombies and stuff like that. Did you grow up in families that were like fans of the genre, or how did you come to become fans of genre films?
This is the part where you have to.
You have to call on us,
Adam,
like children.
Adam.
We're all paralyzed until you pick.
I'm like, oh shit, everybody froze now. Okay. Sorry guys. Adam, let's go with you.
I don't remember that my parents were fans of genre, but they were supportive. Like my mother knit me a Freddy Krueger sweater when I was a kid because I was so into Freddy Krueger. So that was like adorable. And my dad took me to like a Fangoria convention where when I was 12, where I won a costume contest.
Whoa.
So Fangoria has always been an important part of that life. I think what they did was they fucked me up by taking me to see movies that I was too young for, like Watership Down, which, Chris, you have that? Like, yeah. I feel like, because I'm super interested in trauma and movies being about trauma and the way that horror is about that. And sometimes I think like maybe just in my DNA, like I feel like horror, like movies in general have to create a traumatic response. When I look at all my favorite movies, like there's all these milestones. Like I saw Watership Down when I was tiny, and that just, I'm still afraid of the world because of that. Pink Floyd, The Wall destroyed, like just this, like all my favorite movies are things that like are problems. And so maybe I was like, oh, that's what it is to be a filmmaker. You got to create problems for people.
All right, Chris, what's your take on that?
I mean, it's similar in the sense that like but a slightly different dynamic or setup, which was my parents had one of those like classic ugly divorces when I was about 5 or 6. And so my dad, who was already a horror fan, by the way, he was a big horror fan. But he was like, I'm going to be cool dad and let my kids do shit they're not supposed to do. And so, you know, the horror section of the video store, especially the video store that we grew up around, you know, it was like tucked in the back, like right before the porn section. and I would always sort of feel myself magnetized to it, you know, and I would sort of just like skirt around it. And then finally one day my dad was just like, go ahead. And so I just started grabbing horror movies and bringing them up to the counter. And I would watch like 5-6 of these things a week. And he really didn't police it too much. There was one movie I was not allowed to rent, which was I Spit on Your Grave. And that was the only one. That was the only movie that was off limits. And I would watch a lot of these with my dad. And so I think it was sort of a combination of like, ooh, I'm doing something taboo and I get to hide it from my mom because my mom was like very ultra conservative and religious. But I also had this kind of cool special thing that I got to do with my dad that nobody else in my family had, because I grew up in a really big family. I had 8 brothers and sisters, and so like this was like the one thing I got to sort of own with him.
And then you had to wait until you were 10 years old to watch I Spit on Your Grave.
I think I was like 7.
Oh, 7. Wow. He made you wait 6 months.
Yeah, it was fine. You know, it's great.
Oh, wow. All right. How about you, Zoe?
I was a real scaredy cat. I still am. I find life terrifying. And so I think like actually the first movie that I felt like comfortable watching all the way through was The Craft when I was 14, because I was like, oh, I can get down with this. Cause like, I think I saw myself in it, for the first time. And I saw how the genre could, empower outsiders and also sort of like be a vehicle for social commentary in a really cool way. And so, yeah, I think those are always like the kinds of genre films that I find myself really drawn to and inspired by. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm always like, I guess I'm always looking for the weirdos, which is like what the beauty of genre, both films and filmmakers are, you know, that it is really about like heroizing outsiders a lot of the time.
We are the weirdos, mister. Yes. How about you, Shawn?
I come from a big family, but my dad was a general in the Air Force, and he wrote criminology books, and we were not allowed to, violence wasn't really allowed in the house. We didn't watch much TV. We weren't allowed to play with G.I. Joes or anything with guns, and no horror movies. So I think when I got older, that kind of caused floodgates to open. But when I was a kid, we also lived across the street like everybody does, with somebody with permissive parents, and his dad had, you know, a whole library of horror movies. He was the typical 80s horror guy, and I think I was like 8 years old when I saw Chud, and that was it for me. So yeah, I think just it had to have had something to do with being denied all that stuff for a long time. We were allowed to read whatever we wanted, so I read a ton of Stephen King and all that. But yeah, once I got to be an adult, or got into a place where I could watch things, this is what I would naturally gravitate to.
Awesome. All right, how about you, Steven?
As a kid, I was really terrified of horror movies. Like, I couldn't even go in the horror section. Like, I distinctly remember there being a cardboard cutout of Freddy from New Nightmare, like the promotional version of him where he had the like robot claw for some reason, and I like couldn't go near it. I just had to stay away. Like, I just could not handle it. Like, for some reason, yeah, violence and just anything horrifying I couldn't take. I was more of a sci-fi kid, I guess. Star Wars and Transformers and Godzilla and that kind of stuff. But then at a sleepover with some friends, we decided to rent Army of Darkness because I'd seen an ad for it in a comic book, and I was like, "This doesn't look like a horror movie. This just looks like a Ray Harryhausen type thing." And so I watched that, and that kind of opened the floodgates for me of like, oh, this is fun, but it's like in the horror genre. And so that was what led to me, like I actually worked my way backwards through the Evil Dead movies. So by the time I got to the first one, I was like fully into horror movies, and like I felt like something clicked and I got what they were about because I saw the like inventiveness that came with them and all the kinds of stuff that I liked in other genres. All the like fantastical things were there, just like in a more horrifying context, and I found it suddenly, it just like made sense to me. And then yeah, I got the VHS of Army of Darkness that Christmas from my parents. They were pretty supportive. They would let me watch movies that they'd seen that they knew were good. So like I saw stuff like Alien at a very young age because to them that's like, you know, a legit good movie. Like they weren't so into me seeing stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I distinctly remember my mom not letting me rent Hellraiser, but renting me Prince of Darkness instead because she thought that was a good movie by comparison. So, which also traumatized me. But yeah, they bought me Army of Darkness on VHS back in the day when VHS was shifting to DVD, or the media was shifting to DVD. So VHS had bonus features at the end. And so at the end of the Army of Darkness tape, there's this making of for the movie. And that's when I first saw like what an effect shop was. And it totally blew my mind. Seeing like all these guys in heavy metal shirts, like goofing around, making rubber monsters. And so that was like a really important moment for me to realize like, oh, horror movies can be like just a bunch of buddies hanging out, like drinking beer and listening to Iron Maiden and sculpting monsters. And so from that point on, like my fear of horror totally dissipated and I became obsessed with it because I realized how fun it could be. And yeah, my parents were pretty supportive of it, I'd say. They didn't like the super extreme stuff, but I tended to gravitate towards the more fantastical things like the Phantasms and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Army of Darkness is a solid gateway horror, I feel like, because it has the Ray Harryhausen stuff, and so you're kind of mixing that with the horror, but with comedy also, and it is very fantastical. So it's like solid gateway for a child to get into horror.
It is not an intense movie at all. It's like pretty much a PG, except for he says fuck like once, I think, in the movie. Yeah, it's pretty tame when you compare it to like the first Evil Dead movie, especially. So yeah, it's a great starting point for kids, I think.
Right. Also, when you compare it to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so there's that. So y'all kind of touched on this in your last answer, but I'm curious as to which films have been the biggest influence in your careers and your personal style and your inspiration. Zoe, do you want to start?
No.
No.
I need to think about it.
I was making the pensive face. Why did you call on me? All right, Chris.
You know what's funny? Like I think there are films and filmmakers, I think, you know, that had a huge impact on me, and I go straight to Carpenter because I think Halloween was one of the first films to really terrify me. Sorry, the smoke is amazing. I thought it was like Carpenter, like below you, like yes.
That was a perfect cue.
It was a great cue. It's the fog. No, I mean, I think between Halloween and The Thing, you know, like I bounced between those two movies so much because they were such controlled movies, and he really understood suspense. And so those were big influences. But like I have a distinct movie going experience, I think that really informed my career. And I remember when I went to go see, which is the less popular, or at least the less lauded movie of the franchise, but when I went and saw Aliens in the movie theater, and I saw it opening weekend, and I was sitting in the audience, and it was packed, and you know the movie was intense and scary and fun. And then of course Sigourney Weaver comes out in the loader, and you know she says, you know, get away from her, you bitch. And the audience in my theater like was jumping up and down and screaming and cheering. And I remember distinctly looking around and having this like out of body experience and going, I want to do that. And so I think that was a very informative moment, I think, in my sort of movie watching life, because I realized that like I could move people in a way that I had never seen before.
That's awesome. I love that. How about you, Adam?
Yeah,
You're the fog.
it's a huge question, right? Like you watch movies your whole life, but I think I have to like isolate a certain thread of things, which to me was seeing in filmmakers who are doing like a movie that's totally their own, but it's also within the genre language. And so it's like when I saw Habit by Larry Fessenden, and I was like, this is like a Cassavetes movie about a toxic relationship, but there's a vampire in it. Or like when I saw Claire Denis' movie Trouble Every Day, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's like this is an opaque European art movie about love and sex and violence, but it has vampires in it. And like looking at filmmakers who did that kind of thing, and like consistently seeing things like that blew my mind and made me be like, that's the kind of, I want to try to figure out how to do that. Or like the way Wong Kar-wai makes movies that are like, Ashes of Time, like, and this is back, when I was an experimental musician and just trying to watch movies that would blow my mind. I remember seeing, being very high and watching Ashes of Time, which is a kung fu movie about everybody's drinking the wine of forgetfulness, so they don't know who they are or what they are, and you don't know, but it has a little bit of kung fu in it. And I just like, I want to do that. Like I want to like taste this intersection of something that's very dramatic and emotional, but also has these big ideas in them.
Great. All right. Steven.
I mean, I already gave a big speech about it, but I mean, there's a few other movies that were super influential on me. Kitamura's Versus was a big deal for me back in 2000, whenever that came out. I remember renting that and just being blown away by the mix of like, zombie movie. Like it felt like Evil Dead meets like a Yakuza movie meets a kung fu movie. Like it just felt like an anime come to life, and it had more style than like most of the movies I'd seen up to that point. And that was a really eye-opening experience for me because it was a movie that was made for pennies. Like they just went out in the woods and shot it, and it's like it still has more style and energy than most big budget movies. And so that, like after seeing that, I realized like you can do this on any budget level and still have the kind of impact you want your movie to have. So I'd say that was a big influence. And also Don Coscarelli's Phantasm is a huge influence on me. Basically anything that's made for like no money, I have a real fascination with, because I really appreciate the like shoot it on weekends mentality. And that movie just has such a perfect Lovecraftian tone that I feel like nobody has really captured since. It has so much dread and such an interesting mythology that it like fully commits to, even when it gets goofy and super weird. It like doesn't shy away from it. It totally commits to, this tall alien like god being that has flying balls that drill into your brain. Like it just totally commits to that. And yeah, watching that as a teenager, really
grim.
Yeah,
grim, man. He's terrifying.
He's like, I'll take Tall Man over Freddy and Jason and Leatherface any day. He is the best like horror villain. He's unstoppable. I love him.
Tall Man for the win. All right, how about you, Shawn?
When I was younger, my two favorite movies were The Dark Crystal and Bugsy Malone. If anybody's ever seen Bugsy Malone.
R.I.P. Alan Parker.
Yeah, so good. And a weird genre movie too, like a musical gangster, little kids, just fucked. But yeah, Dark Crystal. I've always wanted to. I'll always want to make a horror puppet show. I've always like anything dark and puppets. I'm all in for. But the two movies when I was older that probably made me want to be a filmmaker were Reservoir Dogs. I was probably in the 10th grade, and I can remember being in the basement of a friend's house and getting drunk off lemon gin And previous to that, I'd wanted to be a writer of books, and was generally coming to the realization that nobody around me was reading books that they didn't have to. But watching Reservoir Dogs was the first kind of occurrence that I could do something like this with not as much money as I had originally, or I would have originally thought, and that it's a viable option. But that and the Dutch vanishing, that's probably the biggest kind of horror, and the thing that I would always, in the back of my head, that I'm always kind of aspiring to. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant movie.
Awesome. All right, Zoe, you ready for this?
Not yet. No, I've had some time now. I was remembering actually, and this is, I mean, he's a certain genre. John Waters was like one of my first like idols, and I remember going to the video store, and they wouldn't let me and my girlfriend rent Pink Flamingos because we were like 11, and we got our parents to come and sign something, and then we got to watch Pink Flamingos, and then that like changed our lives because people were eating shit on screen, and you know, Divine is an icon, and I think like, yeah, his aesthetic and the worlds that he created and the sort of absurdity that was also like really grounded in so much pain was really inspiring to me. I also, like, a seminal movie for me that I went to see with my mom when I was probably like 12. I have to look when it came out, but was Heavenly Creatures, which is Peter Jackson's first movie, which was such a beautiful story of friendship. But I loved it so much, and my mom was super worried because it is a film about matricide, and I like would not stop talking about it. And she was like, "Am I okay? Am I going to be okay?" But it was, you know, like that was, I think like Peter Jackson, you know, it was so grounded in character and in these young women's connection and their trauma, but also, you know, was playing with animation and I think stylistic choices that really opened me up in terms of what was possible and the risks that one could take. I also really loved Hal Hartley because I like came of age in the 90s, and those were like real 90s. These are not exciting for genre fans, but I'm sorry, this is not really my culture. And then but like, yeah, I think and Cassavetes, those were all like my biggest Agnes Varda. I don't know, there's a long list. I'm a very indecisive person. So the rest of this entire panel could just be me being like, oh, also I remembered one more. I will say that I like Get Out, and I know this is a very recent reference, but Get Out to me was such a perfect film and was so inspiring to me in terms of getting into this genre as a filmmaker in terms of what was possible and yeah, using allegory to sort of tackle sociopolitical themes and issues.
Zoe, can I ask you, was Scenes from a Marriage an influence on Band-Aid?
Yeah, totally.
There's just such a hardcore argument scene, like in the last 2/3 that is like on the level of like the marriage or like contempt, or it's just like it's so brutal and real.
Thank you. Yeah, that yeah, Scenes from a Marriage is like one of my favorites, and so brutal and so hard to, and so like uncomfortable and so voyeuristic, and that was definitely a real influence for that movie.
Awesome. All right, so you're all writers as well. So for the stories that you are bringing to life on the screen, what is it about that particular story that makes you say like, okay, this is the story that I need to tell? Shawn, let's start with you.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What is it about when you're writing a story that makes you think like, okay, this is the story that I need to bring to the screen? Like I have to tell this story.
Usually it just starts with it's a good question. It starts with a single idea, and it could be an image or a theme or something like that. And it just kind of, I write free form a lot and try to stay as open as I can. And when those little ideas bump into another idea and they attach each other, and eventually it just becomes kind of enough of an object that you can build off of it. That's about as good as I can explain.
It's kind of an abstract question. I know it's kind of an abstract idea of how this comes about. And I'm just curious, just, you know, vaguely the best that you guys can explain it. Zoe?
I feel like I'm always trying to figure out a question that I can't answer in my own life through my scripts. Like it's like something that is sort of like gnawing at me, and that I'm clearly trying to like process. And sometimes it surprises me, like, you know, something like Band-Aid, as Adam mentioned, was a very personal story. So that was a sort of a more direct path in. But like when I had to like pitch on something like The Craft Legacy, I had to find my own way into that story. And again, I was like tapping into my inner teenage witch and things. I think that the thing that's so exciting about writing to me is that it's actually like where like some weird channeling happens, where like you're in a sort of liminal state that I really like, that is wild, like certain things from like, you know, the past or the unconscious that come into the process where you're like, whoa, I didn't realize I was still like working through that, you know, which I always find exciting and therapeutic.
Awesome. I'm going to expand on that later, but for now I'll finish out with this question. Chris?
Definitely relate to what Zoe was just talking about, which is I often find myself wrestling with experiences of my past. You know, I touch on grief quite a bit in my work, and I try to do it in an entertaining fashion. But yeah, I lost my dad when I was 16, and that had a huge impact on me. And so I've found that I've definitely wrestled with that quite a bit. And also, like Zoe, when I write something, first of all, it always does start with some sort of a kernel of something. There's some sort of story or some idea that pops into my head. And then what kind of happens, if it's working, if it's good for me, is that it's almost like I'm transcribing. It's almost like I'm watching the movie already, and I'm just sort of trying to get down as much detail as I can. And it's been kind of crazy because there's so many times when I've kind of stopped finally after like a bit of a marathon run, and then I go back and reread stuff, and I genuinely will look at it and go, where the fuck did that come from? Because it didn't feel like it belonged to me, or it wasn't really in my head, and yet somehow it sort of came out of me. And that's usually when I feel like the writing is good for me, when it comes really naturally. When I'm really forcing it or fighting it, that's when I feel like that's the story pushing back. That's telling me that it doesn't want to go there. And so it's usually just sort of continuing to sort of be open and receptive to whatever this movie is that's trying to sort of come out of me.
I love that. Like it's just subconsciously in you, and then you're just getting it out. When it doesn't feel like it's subconsciously coming out, you feel like that's not the best way to tell that story.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Adam?
Yeah, I think I might have a similar experience to what Chris is saying, although I guess for me it starts with like, what's the cool concept around which I can do something visual, and then I'll be writing it and I'll think that it was about that, and then halfway through it's like, oh, like the movie I just did, that Arch Enemy, was like, oh, it would be cool to have a superhero who nobody believes is a superhero and he's from another whatever. And then like deep after many drafts, when I finally started thinking about how am I going to communicate what this movie is about to the actors when we're actually going to make the movie, then I was like, oh, this is about my divorce. Oh, I see, this is about heartbreak in a way that I hadn't set out to do, but it's all there. Some genius came in and wrote that when I was just trying to make an action movie. So I guess I'll try to make that movie now. That's weird. And I think that, there's this weird like evolution that goes along as you're working on a thing. But like, I'll initially be attracted because I want a high concept and it's going to be cool. There's going to be all this conflict. And then every single time I've done something, I'll then at a certain point look back on it and realize what heavy, traumatic part of my life that's about. And then that gives it so much energy and turns it into something that I think that's when it starts to be something that other people will respond to, because they'll recognize their own experiences in it.
Right. Something bigger than the original concept that you thought you were starting out with.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess that's the human dimension of it. And also, since, you know, since we're all specifically writer directors, I think there really is something where you're like translating it into, how am I going to talk to the actor? Like, what thing from my own life can I share with them so that they'll make it real? And that's when you realize that it's based on something real.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen, what's that process like for you?
This question's stressing me out.
Oh no.
Of actual writers, and to be totally honest, writing is my weakest skill when it comes to writing. I find it the most frustrating. So listening to all these real, genuine answers make me realize that I literally just mash keys until I get a thing. And yeah, I really don't know what to say about my process other than usually I imagine a trailer first and then I build out from there. It's always very visual. Like I really don't like staring at words on a page. I would rather like have a physical thing that I can kind of operate and understand, and like having a real thing in front of me just gets my imagination going, as opposed to just like opening up a blank page on Final Draft. So usually it's like I'll start like sculpting and making things and designing stuff at the same time to help keep my interest, to kind of help me get through the writing process. But yeah, I just kind of just fart it out and then hope the actors make the lines sound good. That's my process.
All right.
I want to respond to something you're saying, just to be clear, like I'm with you. Like I find writing miserable. Like it's totally miserable. That's why I have on a lot of my projects I have a writing partner, because then it can just be something nice. When I'm by myself writing, it's absolutely miserable. I hate it, and I'm like, when am I going to be a well-known enough filmmaker that people will give me good scripts so I don't have to fucking do this? Like I just want to direct. I have to fucking write because nobody else is doing the kind of shit I want to do. It's like, and I do feel like I'm just banging on keys, and then suddenly I have to film people saying those words, and it's like,
I totally agree with that. Like having it be a conversation with another person is way more productive than me just sitting alone trying to write a thing out. So yeah, I think I totally sympathize with that. It's frustrating process for me. And I always feel like by the time I get to set, it all goes out the window anyway. Like it's just the whole pre-production process to me is frustrating, because it's a lot of like making plans and making shot lists and mapping things out. And then you get to set and you find out like, you know, your actor's late, you don't have this location. I find like you go in with a plan and you spend all this time like developing this idea just to have it all totally implode on you anyway. So I find all my projects, I'm like trying to predict that and skip past development part, because I know that those dreams are going to get smashed no matter what. Maybe that's just a symptom of working in such a low budget world, but that's just how it works for me in Steve's world.
That optimism, though, I think.
Dude, the best piece of writing I feel like I did in the past year was on the morning of a shoot. During the middle of the movie, an actor had to go to the emergency room, and he was the star of the scene, and we had nowhere else. And I wrote a brand new scene given what we had for the day, and there was something very freeing about that. Like you just solve problems. You know what the movies. You had this whole plan. It goes out the window. Now what do? Now you're making it up as you go along. Now it's alive. Like people who make movies like Wong Kar-wai, where he shows up and he's like, "What should we do? We have this beautiful location and these brilliant actors. Maybe today you'll have a fight." Like that's how I would love to make movies.
Just wing it and go with what you're working with and figure it out for the day. All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a structure. I mean, Chris, you guys do that on like the paranormal movies in a way, right? Like you have an idea and then you play with it.
Yeah, there's definitely definitely been a lot of improv, but a surprisingly also not a lot. I think that's kind of that's the sleight of hand, and the deception about it all. It's how I got into that franchise in the first place, because Orr and Pally did that on the first movie. He got a couple actors together and he would say, hey, you guys are going to have a fight about a demon and then it's going to drag you out of the room. And so when they tried making the second movie, they went with the same approach and they ended up just running straight into a wall. And then I showed up and I was like, hi, I'm going to write a story. And that's kind of where things went. But there was definitely an enormous amount of improvisation on those movies. Because what was cool about making those movies was that you could workshop them because they were so small. And so it was such a nimble production that if something didn't feel like it was working, you could just keep going and going. People thought we were shooting porn because our crews were so small and we looked so shady, and because we looked like we had no money, which is true. But yeah, we would just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. I mean, we could probably cut like 6 movies out of what we had. So, and they still turned out like that. But yeah, no, it was fun.
Yeah. All right, so it sounds like some of you really just loathe the writing process. Some of you guys enjoy it. So as
I would like to say that I don't enjoy it.
Okay.
I don't think it's an enjoyable process. I mean, it's grueling. It's a nightmare. It's a full nightmare, but we do it.
Does anyone like it?
Do any of you actively enjoy it?
I love it, but I smoke a ton of weed.
All right, well, that's the secret. Shawn just gave you guys the secret.
It allows you to settle into a chair and just be focused on something seemingly inconsequential.
Whenever I try that, all of my scenes are just about suicide. I can't.
Okay, so maybe not that method for you, okay?
Find your own muse.
Yes. Well, we're going to workshop that, Adam. Maybe let's not use that method anymore. Okay. So I am curious, as writers, directors, you guys have a certain amount of control from script to screen. Are there any projects that you would write and feel comfortable handing it off to another director? Or are there certain projects where you're like, no, I need to be the one to tell this start to finish? Zoe, you want to start?
I've never been, no, I guess, well, it hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there was a director that was someone that I really admired, or I was directing something else, it would be really cool to see something that I wrote in someone else's hands. But I do love the process of directing my own writing. I think, so much of what I envision in the writing process, I then, it's so much fun to then actually embody that vision all the way through. But yeah, I mean, I'd be down, I guess.
Well, especially if the writing is not the most fun part for you and it's more a means to an end, I imagine that you would then want to do the fun part of directing the story that you sat down to write and bang it out.
Yeah, but I'm such a Virgo that I would probably have to yeah, I don't know. I'm I think I might be too much of a control freak.
When you said I'm such a Virgo, that automatic just made so much sense to me right there when you said that. I was like, no, she wants to direct it.
Yeah. Okay. No, all the boxes are checked. Okay, here.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, how about you, Chris?
It's funny. And I am one of the weirdos that really loves writing. I still love it. And it's always been kind of sort of a coping thing for me in a safe space. So I do like it. I would prefer to direct, I think, most of the stuff that I write, though I have been willing in the past, I have a script that I wrote that's it's a very big budget movie that I don't think anyone's going to give me the money to do. So if the right director came along, I would happily give that to them. And I'm even writing a movie right now for another director. I still do that. And I do it partly because there are some projects that I really enjoy, but I don't have a necessarily deep emotional connection to them. But I enjoy writing them nonetheless. And but I also like working with other directors. I like working with other writers. I just like working with lots of different people because I'm constantly in a state of learning. And so the opportunity to see things through someone else's eyes and to sort of have that experience with them is something that I really relish. And so if that opportunity arises from giving something that I've written to another director, then so be it. I'm cool with that.
That's that.
It's like every time.
Do you have a button or does it just know?
No,
like,
it's automatic. I do have
Okay.
a button, but I haven't been pressing it. It would
Actually,
still-
I have the button.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And dramatic effect,
Press
go.
the button.
All right, Adam and the fog machine.
Yeah, I agree with what Chris is saying. Like, I've never had a script turned into a movie by somebody else. I've been in situations that have come close, or where I was writing something, you know, for a director, with a director, and I've learned so much from that. And like, I had a very briefly, like 13 seconds, Gore Verbinski was going to do something that I had written, and like the conversations that I had with him when he was asking how to develop the story, like I learned so much in like seconds of hearing him talk about that. So that, you know, that opportunity that we have, you know, in this industry to find other people who know more than we do and, you know, we can learn from is awesome. And I would never want to shut off that, you know. On the other hand, I would so much rather direct some other genius's script than hand a script that I've worked on to, you know, to somebody else.
Somebody send Adam a great script. He's dying for it.
I did, right? That's the only reason I agreed to the panel. You guys said you would send me 7 to 8 vetted great scripts. Now, please don't everybody send me your scripts. Abort.
That was actually the surprise at the end of this. This is actually a script swapping thing that we're doing here.
You can just send links in the chat.
Yeah. I thought that would happen to me when I put my phone number at Beyond Fest. I thought I was going to get 80 scripts, but I did not. And that would have been too many to read.
79 is where he draws the line. So if you didn't make that cutoff, I'm sorry.
I'm turning on the smoke machine while the next person answers.
Okay, Steven.
I have a lot of trouble imagining somebody even asking me to write a script for them. So it's such an alien concept. Like, just working solely as a writer, like, it's such a job that I do out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that ever really happening. If it did happen, it would have to be a very specific thing that's very specific to my tastes. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a weird question because it's the thing I never even really considered. Like, if I'm going to go through the trouble of writing a thing, I'm going to make it.
Okay.
That's just my attitude towards filmmaking right now. Check back in like 10 years, maybe I'll join.
All right, when we do the 10th anniversary panel, I will get back to you on that.
I've sold any scripts to anybody. But yeah, as it stands currently, yeah, I don't see that happening. And that would be very weird and uncomfortable for me.
Okay.
The stuff that I write is so kind of specific to my tastes that I feel like it would just read as gibberish to other people, another filmmaker. It would just stress me out.
I feel like, though, maybe for you, it's more like you write the thing so you can make the thing.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
Not that it's gibberish. Yeah.
Well, I write it knowing exactly how I want to do it and what the end product is going to be, like, or at least like what the goal is with it. So the idea of having that kind of collaborative conversation, I mean, yeah, maybe someday I'll try it. It just seems so foreign to me right now.
Okay.
Just either taking other people's material and directing it, or just making my own thing. But definitely not passing my material to somebody else and be like, see what you can do with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And how about you, Shawn?
I do a fair amount of writing for hire, so that kind of stuff isn't very precious to me at all. I also have a bunch or a few scripts that are under option that are mine, that are the budgets, like Chris was saying, they're beyond me. So again, it's not a huge problem to let somebody else do it if the choice is of not having it done or of having it realized with the budget that it deserves. But for stuff that's within my striking range, there's nobody who can do it better, or who can do one of my scripts better than me, or that's my thinking of it anyway. So those ones, it just depends on what the purpose for the script was. If there are some that are specifically written that I want to do, that are written within a budget that I can work with, and I would be much more hesitant to give those away.
Right. Totally get that. So can you guys talk a bit about your process working with actors from selecting to directing, especially when you need to get a particularly demanding performance out of an actor? Shawn, we'll start with you.
I think it helps writing the stuff, because then you become, like, I really don't like interfering with the actor's process. I like just kind of, the best that I can do is be a really good resource for the story for them. And to kind of, instead of trying to convince them of something, of just to kind of give them my reasons, because I was there when it was made, I was there when the seed was there. So just to give them where I was coming from. And usually that builds into kind of a conversation about psychology and things like that, where it's not even really about acting. And then they're allowed to do their process or do their thing with my input still there.
Mm-hmm. And Stephen, is that a similar process for you?
For me, I know I was ripping on the whole concept of pre-production earlier, but the one thing I do like about having time before your shoot, especially with actors, like I like having that time to talk to them and get to know them. And just, I think it's important just to have that relationship, like going into a shoot, because once you start shooting, you're fighting a war every day, at least the stuff I make, where it's like, it's a race to the finish line. And so with actors, I just like to make sure that I'm on the same page with them. And like, I know what they need to be able to, like, you know, assist them in their process, mm-hmm. and give them the answers that they need on the day, and just try and like have all those conversations up front, so we're not doing it on the day. It's like we go into it and I'm confident that they're going to do the right thing in the moment, and any adjustments are just small tweaks, and we're not having big conversations where we're standing around on set being like, why are you acting this way today? Like, I want to have those early on, and I enjoy that conversation. Like, I like having sit downs, like on Leprechaun. I mean, you know, if it's a weird example, but on that movie, I did kind of like a speed dating thing before the shoot, where I had like kind of half-hour meetings with each actor, and it was just kind of like a meet and greet, like, how's it going? Nice to meet you kind of thing. But then also just talking about the character and that kind of stuff. And I find that helped immensely, because everybody's on the same page. I think that's what I like to have when I'm going into a shoot, is like, I want to know that we all have each other's backs and everybody has my back, like when we start shooting, and with actors especially. So yeah, for me, that's the part of preparation that I like, is working with actors and figuring out kind of like what they need to give the best performance on the day.
So kind of getting to know them so you know how to best support them, and also kind of making a blueprint to make sure you guys are all on the same page and know where you're heading.
Yeah, like, because every actor's different. Every actor has different needs and has a slightly different process. And so just kind of like figuring that out, and figuring out how they like to work, and kind of like which buttons I can push on the day and which things I stay away from. That kind of thing too, like figuring out their temperaments is important too. Yeah, really just trying to do all that in advance is my process with actors.
All right, how about you, Adam?
One thing that I really like to do is take the audition process super seriously as an opportunity for me to practice directing the movie. So, you know, if you're casting somebody that you've auditioned, if you wind up casting them, that's already your first rehearsal, in a way. So, but I also look at it as a way for me to, like, the auditions I do, like, I really put a lot into it, so that I'm like, the scene feels different every time a new person comes in and we talk, and I'm like, what if this was the person who's doing, like,
and like really understanding the scenes. And I try to do as many different scenes in the audition process as possible, because it's just like all of this free opportunity to play with the movie and play with the actors. And then probably the trait that annoys my producers the most about me is how much rehearsal time I insist on. And it's just like every movie I've had like at least a full week, and like we will rehearse the whole movie. Like we will improvise things from the character's past and fuck around, and like we'll do every scene, and like, and even then I'll still show up on the first day and be like, fuck, how are we making this movie now? But like that process, like I learned so much from it, and they learn a lot from it, and it's also the fun part. It's like, you just, please producer, stop talking to me about miserable shit I'm hiding in this room with amazing genius actors, and we're just being emotional, and it's great. Like that's why I'm making movies, for that part. So that's the fun part. But I think you could probably make just as good a movie with 0 rehearsals, but I'm really afraid to do that, I guess. So because I started in like music videos and stuff, I'm really like overcompensating in a way of being like, I only know about style. What's an actor? So that's all I focus on now is acting, because I feel like I don't know anything about it.
Okay. So your background is in music videos, and do you feel better then when you run through all these rehearsals? Do you feel better when you get to set, like, okay, this is
I love
it. Solid?
Yeah, I mean, it energizes the whole production to have just been dealing with the actors one-on-one outside of the pressures of shooting, and, you know, getting to letting them get to know me and like why we're doing this scene and what it means. And that stuff is crucial. Like I just want a movie to be like me and the actors, and all of this other magical stuff just happens to make it look amazing.
Right. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the casting process is an opportunity to sort of selfishly, you know, workshop stuff as well, and start to kind of figure out what feels good and what doesn't. I mean, in terms of just like straight up casting, I always tell people that it's sort of like it's always a love at first sight kind of thing for me. And I think part of that is because I'm usually the writer, and because I've had so much time, I have such intimate knowledge of the characters. And so I often feel like I'm just kind of sitting in that room and waiting for that person to show up. And then when they walk in the room, I'm like, oh, there they are, finally. And it really does work that way. Often, like more often than not, they don't even have to audition yet, and I kind of know already that it's them. But then once we get, I'm like Adam, I'm a big, huge fan of rehearsing, and I also carve out a good chunk of time to do that, because it is another opportunity to see what's, not only how to sort of build a relationship with the actors, but also to see what's working in the script and what isn't, because I often will rewrite as a result of those rehearsals. And so I find that to be a really useful tool. And it does sort of help build a certain rapport, you know, and some people feel like it could be a spontaneity killer, but I actually feel it's the opposite. I feel like if an actor fully understands the scene and fully understands sort of the emotional core of what they're doing in a scene, then you can go off script. Like you have the flexibility to go off script because you still understand what the point of the scene is. And that comes from rehearsing it. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm also a big fan of sometimes throwing curveballs at actors, or sort of pushing them into sort of uncomfortable places. I remember when I was doing a Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, a movie that literally no one saw. I saw that. But I was, you know, Ty Sheridan was playing one of these Boy Scouts, and Ty is a very confident person, and I felt like he was having difficulty sort of finding this sort of emotional connection between sort of the shame that his character felt about not wanting to be a Boy Scout anymore, sort of being embarrassed about being a teenager and still being a Boy Scout. And he didn't quite get it. And so I finally just, you know, forced him to wear his Boy Scout uniform and go to and I made him canvass high schools and try and recruit kids to Boy Scouts. And it really humiliated him. And he was really embarrassed. And I remember that he brought so much of that experience back into the role. And so I often find that it's kind of cool to sort of find sort of somewhat dorky exercises to sort of at least help an actor kind of come to sort of get to know their character a little bit better.
And it worked because he got it after
He did
that.
get it. He was
He
great.
get it.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the chat is going off with people who said, yes, they have seen Scout's Guide. Scout's Guide is
No.
awesome. I saw it just
I was
for
the
the
only
record. So. Okay, Zoe.
Well, I guess I obviously the casting process is so important, you know, because that is really, if you cast the right people, then a lot of your work is done as a director, which is the hope. That then it's just about shaping something together. You know, you never want to be like fitting a square peg into a round hole or whatever. But you know, I as an actor don't love rehearsing. I really like love the magic of what happens like on the day, but I'm also that's me, and as I think Stephen said, you know, every actor is so specific in terms of their needs, and I think it is a director's responsibility to then cater to each of those needs specifically. So it's a lot of bandwidth, you know, that you're having to really constantly go like, okay, well, that person needs a ton of rehearsal, but that person doesn't like to rehearse. So what do we do when we have to like get both of their processes in a conversation together? But I, you know, I think I generally tend to like do sort of speed throughs with actors and like just get the lines really down. I come from a theater background myself as an actor, and to me, like, you can't play off script until you're fully on script and you really understand the language that you're using as your weaponry, so to speak. So yeah, we do like speed throughs because I also, I guess what I have a fear around with running things too many times is actors getting stuck in the ways that they want to like, I don't know, there's just like, it's always to me about finding the fun and like breaking habits to see like how we can get actors to step out of their own way and to get out of their own head. And so like creating environments where there's just a lot of room to play, even though there's so little time, you know, on most days to really play. So yeah, I guess I just my favorite, like, I guess my favorite type of acting is acting where they are like sticking to a script, but it seems like improv, which is sort of what Chris was talking about. And so I try to just create environments that allow for that sense of play and exploration, but still really being very loyal to the word on the page.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing these speed throughs, are there times, like, have you had an actor tell you like, hey, I actually really love to do a shit ton of rehearsals, and then you add more? Like, did they come to you and say that? Or how do you feel out like, oh, I think they're really into rehearsing?
You know, like the two films I've directed are very different. And on Band-Aid, we shot that film in 12 days and we did no rehearsals.
That was a collective gasp. I wish I had like a screenshot of just like, well, what the hell?
It's like a good movie. How could it be 12 days?
Oh, thanks, Adam. What we did rehearse, because we played the music live. It's the story of a couple who starts a band, and so we play the music live in the film. So Adam Pally and Fred Armisen and I all would rehearse the songs, but we never rehearsed the words that we were saying. We were just getting the songs down, which in and of itself was an intimacy exercise, you know, which is I think what everyone's talking about is like, how do you get actors to a place where they are feeling comfortable to go to places of discomfort, you know, on the day. And then on the Craft Legacy, like we were doing spells and shit. So that required choreography, and those days, even though it was a 30-day shoot, they were just as fucking insane as they were on Band-Aid, because the scope was so much bigger. So the race to the finish line was just as intense, if not more intense, every day. So in that way, we were rehearsing a lot more, just to like make sure that we understood exactly what we were doing every day, when it came to like yeah, mostly just like choreography and blocking, really, to make sure that everyone knew what they were doing. I was also working with much younger cast members, which I think also shifts the amount of sort of prep time you need. But Kaylee Spaney, who plays Lily, who's like the lead of the Craft Legacy, she would come to my house every weekend on the shoot, and we would rehearse every single one of her scenes, just the two of us, that we were shooting that upcoming week, and I would just play every other character opposite her. Because it wasn't about getting like that, you know, to answer your question, like that was what she wanted. Right. But it was, we were in the midst of shooting. So it wasn't like, we're going to get everyone together every weekend to run through every scene. It was just about her and I running that and getting her to a place where she understood emotionally what she had to prepare for every day. Cause it was a pretty grueling role.
And you were coming off of you have a one-woman show that you've done. So you were like so prepped to like do the entire cast of the Craft. You're like, I got you.
Yeah. No, I would put on different hats and mustaches and stuff. It was cool.
Oh, I hope that's going to be on like the extended features behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I would pay to see that for sure. In many of your stories, I was like going back and like looking at everybody's work, and I realized that there's a common thread. Chris, you touched upon this earlier. We've talked a little bit about this. There's a common thread of loss or grief, and I know writing can be cathartic. Are those themes something that you guys set out to intentionally include, or is it just something that happens organically and lends itself to the genre? Shawn, you want to start us off?
I just like downer movies, I think.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I don't know how else to explain this. Of course, everybody has a lot of tragedy in their lives. I'm not sure if I can identify that as one of the, as any kind of catalyst for any specific idea, but yeah, I like movies where things end poorly for people.
I'm gonna smoke a shit ton, and I'm gonna sit down and write something where just everything goes terribly awry for everyone involved.
That's my day.
I got it. I just did your tagline for you right there. All right, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like with the stories I want to tell, like it's important that they have as much heart as possible, and for there to be heart, I feel like you need to have some elements of loss or tragedy in there. So I find like, even though my stuff is pretty lighthearted for the most part, I always try to weave in a little bit of that. And yeah, I mean, some of it definitely comes from personal experience. But yeah, I definitely don't make it the like front and center piece of my stories, but I feel like to have the like kinds of highs that I want, like cinematic highs of that kind of like catharsis where it's, you know, a very like satisfying climax where good triumphs over evil. You kind of have to have your downer, your dark night of the soul periods in your story to get to that. So yeah, I do draw from some personal things to get there. But again, not to the extent I think of the rest of the present company. Far more skilled at these kinds of storytelling things than I am, but yeah, I draw from it a little bit.
All right. Adam, the fog right on cue, baby. There it is.
Making me very vulnerable to answer questions. I don't know. This is something I struggle with. I mean, I like really fun, lighthearted movies. I like watching them. I don't know how to write them, clearly. I think the thing that I struggled with for a while, you know, I thought about this a lot on my second movie, Daniel Isn't Real. When I first started writing it, and it was years and years in the making, I wanted to do something that was absolutely nihilistic in a way, because I felt like we as a society lived in denial of what the world is like and what humans are doing. And but then the movie got greenlit right around 2016, right around the election, and then all anybody talks about since then is the world is coming to an end and we're living in apocalyptic times and all people are trash, and so that no longer felt like a interesting point of view. So then I had to figure out what is my, so I sort of had to understand that my point of view is
So now we all are on the same page. I don't need to convince anybody about nihilism. I need to understand how we can still have hope and empathy, and that those are going to be the most important things moving forward, despite being within a, maybe a nihilistic universe or a darker system. Like, how do we elevate ourselves beyond that spiritually or emotionally? So that's become what the quest is. I can't stop writing things that have a dark point of view, but I'm not interested in a dark point of view as so much as I'm interested in getting out of it.
It's interesting that it informed and kind of like our present reality kind of flipped what your initial like instinctive writing is.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting.
It did. Yeah, absolutely. I guess you have to, that's how you respond to the times.
And Chris, I know you definitely touched upon this earlier, but if you would like to add to that.
Yeah, I'm just, I love being sad too. No, I actually feel terrible. I am actually in the middle of my press junket today, and they are making me leave.
Okay.
I apologize. I had a really good time chatting with all of you guys. You're all awesome, and I'm a huge fan of every single one of you. So thank you, and carry on.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you, Chris.
Tell everybody to see your movie. Make sure everybody.
Go see my movie.
Go see the movie. Freaky.
Freaky, November 13th. Bye.
Bye. Right, Zoe.
Wait, what was the question? Just like, why are we so sad? What was it?
Why are you guys such a bunch of sad saps all the time? No, it's just a lot of you guys have the themes of grief and loss in your movies. So I was curious if that was cathartic for you. Was it intentional? It just lent itself to the story and the genre?
Yeah, I'm also a sad person. And I think like I tend to try to process grief and loss and longing through a comedic lens sometimes. And I think in the craft legacy, there's like many tones. It navigates a lot of tones. So there's comedy, and there's also like a mother-daughter sort of drama that was loosely based on my own life experience as an adolescent. And then, on this film, I got to explore even sort of more deeply dark and dramatic elements, because of the genre. But yeah, I think, like I said earlier, it is like a cathartic process. I think it is always something that I do, even though I did say that writing is a nightmare. It is a necessity for me. It's a necessary nightmare, which is what all art making is. That like it is the only way I know how to try to slog through that swamp of emotions all the time.
All right. I'm also really hoping that Necessary Nightmare is the name of like your next project.
It's the name of my memoir. I'm turning my video off for 1 second because I have to move rooms, but I'm not leaving because I'm not as big a dick as Chris. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Okay. I'm just kidding. I'll be back.
Okay. All right. Guys, tell me about some of your upcoming projects, and then we'll take questions from viewers that they've been sending in. So, Shawn, you want to talk to us about some upcoming projects?
My new movie is called Hunter Hunter. It is with Devon Sawa and Nick Stahl and the very talented Camille Sullivan. It was picked up by IFC Midnight, who have been really, really great to work with so far. And it's up, I think it's going to be US theatrical on December the 18th. So a couple months from now. Very much looking forward to it.
All right. Very excited for that. Looking forward to it. Steven?
Well, my movie, Psycho Gorman, is doing a bit of a festival tour right now. But then it's also coming to theaters, I believe it's like mid-January. Yeah, it's a kid's adventure movie with the Monster Man. Two kids dig up a monster in their backyard and go on crazy adventures. And it's just very much a love letter to like kind of early 90s, like Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, basically all the stuff that I clearly am obsessed with a bit of a dark slant to it.
Naturally.
Yeah. And I also am in the process of working on this Day of the Dead show. I actually have to go back to shoot a little bit more for it in a couple weeks. And I think that's going to be on Sci-Fi next year sometime, like October 2021 was the last thing I heard. Maybe don't quote me on that.
Oh no, I just wrote it down and I just...
Oh no.
Okay. It's on the internet. It's living forever. I'm sorry. You guys got to push that out. October 2021.
Right.
All right.
So, yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Day of the Dead is the TV show version of the Romero movie. Is that what you're doing? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah, they're fun. Lots of zombies, lots of crazy shit. It's super low budget, but I think that actually is helping it a lot to make a very like scrappy, energetic little zombie narrative. And this is coming from a guy who is so sick of zombies. So and I think says a lot. Yeah, like everybody, I'm pretty over The Walking Dead and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Well, this sounds cool and I'm excited for it. All right, Adam.
So I have a movie coming out called Arch Enemy. It comes out in December 11th. It stars Joe Manganiello as a drunk man who lives under a bridge and tells people that he is a superhero or was a superhero in another dimension. And it also has Glenn Howerton is in it as a bad guy, and he's insane. It has Paul Scheer in like the most insane thing he's ever done. It has Amy Seimetz, who is brilliant. And it has Zoe Griggs, who is just a genius. Skyland Brooks. Those are all the actors. It played at Beyond Fest a couple of weeks ago, Drive-In, which was super fun. But those are like really the only people who've seen it. So I'm really curious to see how people respond to it. It was for various reasons I wound up using none of the same crew that I had on my previous movie, and yet it still feels very similar, I think. And so that's an interesting experiment to me in seeing like how much you leaving up to other people. I don't know. I guess that's more of a personal quest than something to share on a panel, but it's something.
You got very pensive right there too. You were like looking off.
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I long for the kind of like, creative partnership of like, I've been working with this DP for 30 years together, and it's like, but somehow there's this like shifting sand, and yet I feel like it's in the same universe as the movie that I made before it. So I'll be interested to see how people respond in that way.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. People are going nuts for the kitty there, Shawn.
Oh, you got a cat.
Cat sighting. Cat chat. Here it is. It begins. All right, Zoe.
The Craft Legacy is out today on all platforms. So hopefully everyone will tune in. What else am I supposed to?
That's what was the other question. You're just plugging it right now.
I've been doing a press
Ellipsis,
note for a couple of weeks, so I'm like, what's my name? It's so exciting. It's always such a thrill to like give birth, in that way, but also terrifying. And so, everyone, be nice to me when you watch it. Thanks.
Yes, return. I saw it last night actually, and I'm a huge fan of the original. Grew up on that, same as you, and I loved it.
Oh, thanks.
Are you guys ready for some questions from viewers here? Let me see. Zoe, this question is for you from Jessica. Zoe is tackling a beloved property. Is that nerve-wracking? And are there any properties the other filmmakers dream of taking a swing at? So you kind of just did answer the nerve-wracking part.
It is nerve-wracking. Well, it's a tremendous amount of pressure because it is such a beloved property, and it's a beloved property to me. So like, I also am like my toughest critic, but also like, I think because the original was so personally resonant for so many people that felt seen for the first time in sort of mainstream popular culture, like it's something that I felt I could only honor by not trying to recreate. Like, it's obviously the same sort of container that I'm working within, which is teenage witches, but I really wanted to like have the movie stand on its own and tell its own story while still paying homage to the original. So the short answer is yes, it's terrifying. But you know, it's also like a dream because it's something that I love so much.
Right. And is there any other property that you have a dream of taking a swing at?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but fuck it, I'll just talk about it. I wrote a live action feature of Daria, which was which is one of my favorite things ever. And it's where Daria is now. So yeah, so I hope that I get to make that soon.
I think we all hope the same as well, crossing our fingers,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How about you, Adam? Is there anything that you would want to take a swing at?
I want to do a remake of Videodrome, but it would be about David Cronenberg making Videodrome.
Oh, okay.
But it's like Videodrome. I don't know.
Nice.
I'll make that.
All right,
Steven's
Steven.
mad. He wants to make that movie.
He said, "Oh no, you don't."
I mean, this is a goofy one, but my passion project is to make a movie adaptation of the video game Doom, which they've done twice now, and both movies are god awful. I was so excited for that one with The Rock that came out in like 2006. Like I was literally waiting my whole life for it, and it was such a stinker. So it's become my personal vendetta to make a good version of that movie. And so, yeah, I'm just going to keep putting it out into the world until Universal eventually is like, we just got to let this guy make this movie already. He won't shut up about it. So, yeah, that's my favorite property. For the record, you have do it, doom it, do it, yes, haha, oh please do it. So there's some support for this. One guy says Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem. But also Duke Nukem. That would be great. Ryan Turek, Doom. All right, Shawn. Make it happen.
I can't think of any film that I would want to redo. If I could adapt any property, it would probably be the Sandman comics from Neil Gaiman. I've always loved them and always thought that they should be on film or on TV, and it's never panned out for them. But yeah, that would be my thing. Or like a shot-for-shot remake of the Psycho remake.
Sweet. I think it's better than the original, man.
Shot-for-shot remake of the Psycho remake. Got it. Okay. All right, this question is from Kurt. What is the single most important habit you have when writing? Shawn.
Sorry?
The single most important habit you have when writing.
No pressure, the absence of pressure. I think if you're chasing it, it's going to run from you. So as long as there's an opportunity to sit down and let it happen, then that's really all I need.
Awesome. All right, Steven?
Every tool of procrastination at my disposal. YouTube, video games, my dogs, anything to distract me, because I find the thing that keeps me writing is doing other things. I think I get the most writing done when I'm supposed to be doing something else. And I'm like, oh, I really should stop doing this and go write that script now. But when I'm actually writing, I have nothing else to procrastinate with, then I'm just totally blank. So yeah.
Well, it's still on your mind, right? You're doing something else, playing with your dogs or whatever, but you're still thinking about it. And it's different than sitting in front of like a blank white glowing screen with that cursor just like.
Yeah, it's always like when I'm driving or something, like doing something else where I'm like as far away from my computer as possible. That's when I'm like, oh, here's how that entire scene should play out and how the dialogue should be. It like always hits at the worst time. So it's like, yeah. Going and doing things other than writing seem to help my writing the best.
Well, that's when you just got to Twin Peaks it and you have your little voice memos and then you can go back and transcribe it.
Probably going to do that instead of texting notes while I'm driving, which is nuts.
No, please don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Adam?
Yeah, I don't have any writing habits. That's the problem.
Okay.
But I do think the habit of like remembering that it's okay that it's miserable. Like I think that's really, it's like we all think like, oh, if I feel bad about it, that means I'm not good at it. There's just no relationship between that input that you're giving yourself and the work that you're doing. There's no relationship. And so that's the habit that I'm always trying to go back to.
All right. Zoe?
I try not to go back and rewrite until I've got a first draft. I kind of like to just like get it all out, because I just know that I'm a person who will then just rewrite the first scene until like until I'm 100 years old. So that's something that I try to do, because I find that getting that first draft out, if I'm not outlining, first, if I'm just writing and seeing where a story takes me, I do find that like getting that first draft out is such a huge hurdle. And once I do that, then I can sort of like take a breath and go, okay, now let me go in and fine tune and move scenes around. And I also have like a trusted group of friends that I send drafts to, which I find is really helpful if you can find those people in your community, because I just get so inside of it that it's hard sometimes to step outside and go like, what else does a viewer need from this character's arc or from the structure overall? So I tend to like break those friends into like stages. So there's like the first draft stage of group, and then there's like another group that will read the next draft, and so on and so forth.
That's it. You have them designated teams like, all right, it's go time for second draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, this question is from Kiko. After this terrifying year, do you think horror movies are bound to look for new fears? Adam.
I don't know what new fears are. I mean, we have the same internal fears. We have the same emotional fears, but we always have to externalize them in exciting new ways. I don't know if the question behind the question is like, when reality is scary, do we still need horror movies? It's a totally legitimate question. I guess we'll see how much worse things get. I don't know.
I feel like you touched upon that earlier also, though, of just kind of shifting what your initial approach is to horror.
Yeah, I think the fear, right? Like the new fear we have to look at is like, how do we not let it break us? That's the fear that's the new fear that I think is interesting to address.
Mm-hmm. All right, Shawn?
I don't know. I'm really waiting to see the first movie where everybody's got a mask on. But I think that what we're not going to see are like virus movies, or I think people are going to have quite enough of that, and I'm not even sure. That's why it's so interesting. This mask thing is, when this comes out, or is it just going to drive people nuts? Like they've had way too much of it and they don't need to see it, or like it's inevitable because it's a piece of our history now. So there are going to be times, there are going to be movies with that stuff coming out. I'm just really interested to see if there's an appetite for it. I don't know.
All right, Zoe?
Well, I do think that like what was exciting to me, as I mentioned before, about getting into genre filmmaking was that it's such an incredible sort of like way to also really dive into socio-political issues in a way that I think other genres, it's much more difficult to do. Mm-hmm. And I think to bury those issues in allegory and mythology, that genres which like give such a beautiful space to do. So I would hope that, I think a lot of the fears are also just about like a lot of the pain that this world is in, and how, deeply broken this world is right now. And I think I would hope that films do address that, whether that's through representation on screen and off screen as well, or you know, through the themes that people are looking to tackle through their art.
All right, Stephen.
I mean, I'm a little concerned that the next year is just going to be a glut of pandemic-related thrillers. I'm particularly excited about that. I want to jump ahead like 10 years and see how people interpret 2020, like with a bit of distance and a bit of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm looking forward to over the next year is watching shows and movies and trying to spot when extras forget to take their masks off, because I can confirm from experience that it will happen as hard as you try to make sure that they take them off before you do a take. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of interesting stories to come from 2020. My concern, my like kind of jaded concern, is that it's just going to be a lot of like cash grab stuff just to capitalize on the moment. And yeah, I'm more interested in seeing like down the road what kind of like deeper reflections on this year we get once people have actually had time to like clear their heads on it, because it's just been such a fucking bonkers year. I think we need time to just kind of like figure out what even happened, and then figure out like what kind of stories can come from that. I mean, I could be totally proven wrong. This is just me talking on my ass. There could be a thing that comes out next year that's totally awesome, but my concern is that it's just going to be like, you know, one person in an apartment, like fighting pandemic zombies or something, you know. So basically Day of the Dead, sorry.
All right. We kind of touched upon this a little bit different. This question is from Noah. If you were each given one iconic horror property to remake or reboot, what would it be and what would your approach be? Do any of you have an answer to that, or do you feel like you kind of already answered that earlier?
I mean, one thing I would like to chime in on is that it's interesting, I don't know if any of you have been following all the controversy around the Friday the 13th franchise, and how it's like impossible to get that franchise off the ground right now. But just purely out of curiosity, it's not even like my favorite franchise, but I'd love to just tackle something like that. Just because the iconography is so rich and there's so much history to it, I think it would be fun to like throw my perspective on something like that. Like, because so many of these franchises, like, they were such a like jumping off point for different filmmakers, and they kind of had like the leeway to do what they wanted with them. I think it would be fun to try and do something like that with a Jason movie.
Noah says Jason in the snow, and Kiko suggested COVID the 13th. So there you go.
Good idea. I love Jason in the snow. That's a great idea.
Do any of you other guys, is there like a certain property that you would want to tackle, like any kind of iconic horror franchise?
I feel like I would love to do anything that Stephen King wrote, just because like so many of my favorite filmmakers did a Stephen King movie. So like that's an important thing, and he's got so many of them. But I don't have like a dream Stephen King.Maybe I'd want to make a movie about Stephen King making Videodrome. That would be weird.
I see this whole series for you in the future.
Yeah.
All right. John Estrada says, thank you to all the panelists. What was the biggest challenge getting your first directing gig or making your first film? Adam, you want to start us off on that one?
I mean, the biggest challenge is that it takes a miracle to get a movie made. And it's just like unbelievable how hard it is. So I had written Daniel Isn't Real, and after I wrote it with Brian, I was like, there's no way I can get the money for this. This is a big movie. Let's write something else that we can make real cheap, real fast. And then that took years to get made, and it was still super cheap. And at a certain point in that epic journey to get it made, I was in Vancouver for like 2 months. We were told financing was coming. I was in Vancouver. We were casting the movie. And then it was like, oh, the financing never came. And now I have to drive back to LA broke with no movie. And like, it's just, what was the question? How do you make, I have no idea. It's like a nightmare.
The biggest challenge getting your first directing gig.
Yeah, I mean the challenge, like you know, the people I know who've like, and it sounds like Zoe is one of these people who like scrape together like a couple $1,000s and got a movie made for like nickels. You know, they weren't waiting to get it done, and I thought I was doing that with a movie that was $200,000, and it took years to get that. So I don't know. The challenge is like writing, like figuring out a way to make something that you can get made that nobody else can tell you not to make. Because you got to make that first movie before people even take you seriously as somebody who can make a movie. It's a really tough system. It's not a system. It's just a soup.
I feel like you all have that in common, though. I feel like you guys weren't waiting for somebody to hand it to you. Like you were just like, well, I want to fucking make something, so I'm going to make it. Like you just figured it out. Like you wrote it and you created this thing and you're like, I want to direct, so I'm going to write this and then direct it and figure out how to get the money and the funding for it.
Yeah, nobody's going to give you money just right off the bat. It's I'd never written a short or never made a short film before or anything. My first feature was self-financed, and you know, we had enough money to make a short or a feature that repeated itself a whole bunch of times, so that every time you were shooting a scene, it was 3 or 4 scenes, and you know, you could make $40,000 stretch out to 90 minutes. But nobody's gonna make that step, and that's why being a writer for sure helps, because you can make your own content instead of having somebody take a leap of faith on you.
Nice. Steven?
Yeah, I really think it's a case of like, you just have to go out and do it and just make it happen, because if you don't have something to show people, like they're never going to give you money to make a thing. What was the actual question again?
It was your biggest challenge getting your first directing gig or making your first film.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge was, like, I guess I could consider Manborg my first feature, but you know, just basically doing it all with my bare hands, because yeah, there's no way I was going to get money for it. I applied for grants, and all the the response I always got was, it's too ambitious, you'll never make this thing. And so it's kind of like, you know, out of spite, I was like, no, I'm going to make this thing, screw you. And then cut to like 3 years of me slogging away, teaching myself After Effects, shooting this thing on green screen in my parents' garage. Like, but yeah, it's, I think we all have kind of a similar experience of like, you just have to go out and do it and make a thing to show that you can do it, because nobody's just going to take you on your word that you can do it. You have to have some kind of product to show to actually like break into this industry in any kind of meaningful way. And so that just means like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and just crawling through the mud, like fighting the low budget war to make this thing, so that you can present it to the movie gods and be like, can you give me a little bit of money this time? Yeah.
All right. And Zoe, sounds like you had a similar experience as well, but what was your greatest challenge getting your first directing gig?
Well, I gave it to myself, like most of the people here. So, yeah, I mean, I, you know, fourth what everyone has said, which is that it is a nightmare. It is just, it's like, it is so impossible to get a movie off the ground. And in any of the worlds, like it's impossible to get a micro budget movie going for a totally different number of reasons. And it's impossible to get a studio movie going as well. But I would say, yeah, it is about carving out opportunities for yourself and being smart about the stories that you're writing so that they are contained in a world that you could shoot for a small amount of money and in a small amount of time. You know, I think with Breaking Upwards, which was the first film that I co-wrote and produced and starred in, which we made for 15 grand. And then, you know, with Band-Aid, it was very similar. It was like, what's the smallest number of locations? What's the lowest budget that we could make this for? And then, you know, with Breaking Upwards, like we asked like all of our friends and family to give us like, you know, $100 each, you know, or something, where it was just like, Yeah, and people are doing that all the time with crowdsourcing, but I do think it is, there are so many gatekeepers, and it is such a, I think emotionally, it's such a challenge to not take the no's seriously and to not let them impact your level of confidence, which is so important, you know, when you're trying to make a movie, because it is such a confident act. Like you are telling a story that you believe has to be told, and that you're the person that has to tell it. So when people are saying that you don't deserve that opportunity again and again and again, it is, I would say that the greatest challenge is to continue to trust in yourself that you do deserve that opportunity.
It just sounds like so fucking, like you just got to be so relentless, you know what I mean? Like you're just hearing these no's and you guys got to be like, yeah, I know this is the 1,000th time I've heard this no, but I gotta like kick these fucking gates open anyway. And you did, so that's awesome.
but I mean, you can also learn from the no's, you know what I mean? It's not just that you're saying like, fuck you, I'm gonna do this anyway. It's like, okay, well, is there, like, I think filmmaking that at any stage, like whether I'm talking to my friends about the scripts I'm writing, or even once I make a movie, I do a lot of friends and family screenings. I think we probably all do, just to get like eyes on it. And certain notes that people give you don't resonate, but there's often some things that even if one person gives you a note, it doesn't resonate, but then you realize there's sort of a consensus around it where a number of people are saying something similar, or there's a certain moment in a script or a film that people keep bumping on, they don't know why. Like those are the things to listen to and then to grow from, even though they can feel like insulting or or you don't want to hear those things.
Yeah, and you learn as you go. I just want to add to that a little bit what she's saying. Like, you know, I started trying to make Daniel Isn't Real, and I guess it was 2011 or 2012. And like, if I had miraculously gotten all the money right then to make that movie right then when I wrote it, it wouldn't have been good, because I had to go through so much else to like learn how to make that movie, and made a whole other movie that, you know, and like, so it's sometimes maybe, you know, it's okay. Like, let it be okay that you're not doing the thing this second, because you're actually doing something else that's getting you there.
I feel like that kind of goes back to what Stephen was talking about too, where it's like, even if you're not sitting down and you're working on it, it's always there. Like it's always marinating, and it's always, you know, it's growing and it's working its way into whatever that end product is going to be, which I think is a cool part of the process. And 2 more questions for you, real quick. Zoe, this one's for you from Corey. Does your process change when you're making a teen-centered movie?
Well, I guess it changed in terms of, like, as I mentioned, the rehearsal process. Like I did feel that because I was working with a group of younger actors and whose I think chemistry as a coven was just so essential to the success of the film. That did change my process, and added more, I think, in the prep time. But no, I mean, not a ton. I think all of the young people in this film were sort of old souls. So it was like working with, you know, or maybe I'm a young soul that is trapped in a middle-aged woman's body. But it didn't feel like there was a huge sort of vast expanse between us, and it didn't really change my process. I would say the biggest difference in the process was that this was a film that was just so much larger in scope than anything I had made before. But like we're all talking about, like I still had to be so scrappy, you know, which really came in handy from the micro budget world.
Nice. Okay. And this question is for everybody. This is from Greg. No, sorry. Yes, Greg. Is there one step in pre-production that you feel is important to a smooth shoot? Shawn, you want to start us off?
Literally every step. It can all fall apart at any moment. Financing would probably be the biggest, you know, pre-production thing. But yeah, I don't know what I could single out that would be more than the others.
All right, Steven?
I think figuring out what the worst case scenario is for the shoot, and then moving forward, assuming that that's going to be the shoot, because that's so far been my experience. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and I find that comes down to crew's experience as well. Like people that have been in the industry longer have the kind of experience to know like what kinds of train wrecks are coming, like what kind of things are going to slow you down. And so just trying to be prepared for that stuff and having those conversations in advance. Even like stupid, simple things like weather. Like for PG, we couldn't have predicted that it was going to rain like the whole shoot. And just being like, we pivoted and changed kind of the look of the movie to accommodate that. And it went from being kind of an idyllic like E.T. world into being, you know, kind of a muddy Saving Private Ryan suburbia where everybody is all dirty and grimy. And I felt like that was authentic to kind of like the childhood experience I had. So it worked out fine. But if we had just thrown our hands up at that and been like, oh, well, we can't shoot this thing, like we wouldn't have shot a movie. So I think in pre-production, just like being prepared for all the awful shit that's going to get thrown at you and trying to just predict it as much as possible and being realistic about it too, I think is the smartest way to attack a thing, especially on a low budget. All
right, Adam.
Yeah, I think there's a way to do that to address what Steven's saying, where I feel like understanding, like your understanding of the movie and your constant communicating of that to everybody, what the theme is, why the style of the movie is what it is. Like if you can constantly express that succinctly and know it 100% certainly to everybody, then they're all working with you towards it. And when things go wrong or when cool opportunities arise, everybody is like on that same sort of silo with you. And an important thing that I really like to do in prep is before the actors are like the first day of prep, when it's just like your crew, your keys, I like to bring everybody who's involved with the movie together and read the script. So even like the accountant is there and like he's reading a part, and you know everybody is there. The costume designer is reading the character, you know, and everybody's in a room reading the script. And this makes everybody feel so creatively included in what you're doing, and you can sort of like share an experience together, because pretty soon people are going to start getting siloed out and racing around. And I think that kind of like unity and purpose and like let's all sort of celebrate the thing that we're doing together has really helped me feel close to everybody I'm working on a movie with.
Awesome. Zoe?
Yeah, I would echo that. Like prep, all elements of prep are so essential, and there's like never enough time to really like nail everything down. And it is so important to be prepared for worst case scenarios. I tend to like drill like the one-liner, like the order, the sequence of scenes that is happening every day, every week. I ask my ADs to give me the number of hours I have for each scene, including the setup for, you know, lighting and electric, because then I think once we have, like, I have my AD and my cinematographer and my producer, those four people, especially with me, just like run it like over and over, like, okay, so this is what day one is like. We have to get through like the first scene in 2.5 hours. So what does your setup time look like? So that I know exactly how much time I have to work with actors, and what will happen if I don't make that time, how it will impact the rest of the schedule. Like on The Craft Legacy, there were a number of scenes that I knew I would not be able to shoot ever if I didn't get through every day as planned, and every day was so packed. And so that was like, everyone knew, like, because those scenes were so important to me. It was like, we were all just like, we gotta get there. But it is, I mean, every day is such a battle to make it to the end of that day and to make all of your scenes in time. So I do tend to get pretty like hyper vigilant around that stuff.
Hypervigilant. I like that. All right. I could literally ask you guys another like hour or two worth of questions, but I won't. I will cut you loose now. So I just want to thank you guys so much. This was really cool to sit and chat with you. It was super fun. I'm looking forward to all of your upcoming projects. I would have lived at Beyond Fest if I could have and watched everything, but I didn't get to do that. So
thank you so much. It was awesome talking to you.
All right.
Nice meeting all you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you guys.
Can't wait to see your movies.
And thanks everyone for sending in questions and for watching. And all right. Catch you next week for Fangoria stuff. All right. Bye.